Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, today's video I am continuing my series talking about running AD&D First Edition for modern players. And today I'm going to be specifically looking at using the character sheet, and this is not as either simple or as complicated as many people might be led to believe. And the reason why I'm playing both sides of that issue is that it really depends on how you look upon the character sheet, and I'm going to show you some ways that I look at a character sheet and how I suggest my players at my table uh, utilize the character sheet, very initially, and then try to go beyond what the character sheet is. Now, in my last video, you watched as I created I rolled up the attribute scores for a character, assigned them, as I felt that they would best be assigned. Um, Chose a character class. I chose fighter. I went with the human fighter because that is, still to this day the most common character uh, character and race combination that there exists in AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons in general, and um, and then I did what's a professional skill or background skill, so they call it secondary in AD&D First Edition, and then some other skills that I kind of built off of that. So I randomly generated the background skill, the family skill, if you will, and that became a shipwright, and then that really started to create a concept for my character. Right from that initial random roll, and then tying it into the attributes. And I'm going to go into that as I go to the character sheet and actually start going over it. Now, I'm going to switch views here. So my preference is to use the original AD&D character sheets. All right, and I'm in the process of looking to acquire some, but then later those can be photocopied and printed out on goldenrod colored paper so that you'll have that really authentic look. But in the meantime, you can go to websites like Dragon's Foot, and all you have to do is just do a search for AD&D First Edition character sheets, and type in PDF or whatever, and it'll bring you to that website, and you can find a variety of them. So this is the one that I just printed out really quickly, and this is not the very basic AD&D First Edition for the fighter, because that would only have fighter, ranger, and paladin on it. This one is written for utilizing Unearthed Arcana, which in some instances I am using, and I would always use it. I just might not use some of these character classes that are here. But the sheet is written up, specifically for this grouping of character classes. There's also one for magic user and illusionist. There's one for thief, thief acrobat, bard and monk, and so on and so forth. So there are a series of different collections of classes. But this looks daunting, and I understand that this looks daunting. All right, especially if you go to the back as well, and there's a lot there. So there seems to be a lot on here, and it might be confusing. But I am going to simplify this in concept so that you can see, hey, you know what? It's not really that complicated, because you don't need to access this information every single time. You're going to start to realize that, I only need to know the modifiers for certain things. So it doesn't matter if I have a strength score of 16, I'm going to know that uniformly that is going to give me a +1 to damage, for a melee weapon. And I don't need to look at the 16 anymore. That's not necessary for me to look at. I only need to look at my ability to bend bars or lift gates when I'm looking to actually bend bars and lift gates. And even that's not a very difficult um, process or role that you need to make in order to memorize that. So there's going to be certain things that you, as a fighter, in this example, are, there's certain things that you're going to do more frequently than others. And so that frequent activity is going to be something that you're going to end up memorizing very, very quickly. And the fact that you can memorize those very basic things about your character is going to allow you to step away from the character sheet and go beyond just the character sheet. So let me start building this up for you so that you can, hopefully understand where I'm coming from this. And I'm going to compare it to some some of the modern approaches to thinking about role-playing games. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about the issues that really came out of the computer RPG realm of like min-maxing and choosing very, very specific combinations of abilities to maximize your effectiveness in combat. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I was a MMORPG player for a very long time. I still play some computer RPGs. I am not slighting anybody in any way for min-maxing. I mean, I'm literally right now playing a stealth archer in Skyrim, so I am certainly not adverse to, hey, let me see how overpowered this character can actually be in a video game. But there is a difference between what you would do in a video game and then what you're looking to create in a tabletop role-playing game. And so I think there's a benefit to breaking away from that mentality when you're playing a tabletop role-playing game. And so let me once again shift views here and get to the character sheet. So this is the character sheet that I started to fill with information. And so I still haven't named the character, it's still test character. And I chose the lawful neutral alignment because of some of the things that I started to visualize for this character. The character has their HP, which their max HP is 13 and 13. So fighters actually get an additional plus to their hit point bonus from Constitution. A 17 for any other class would only get a +2 for this 17 Constitution, but because it's a fighter, it gets a +3. And then the hit die here is a D10 hit die. I put in the armor class. So this is using descending armor class just for those of you that might be questioning it. So the AC is 2. The chainmail I listed as chainmail and the AC is 5, just so I know where that 2 is coming from. And then the character carries a small metal shield, which is an additional AC -1. And then, human, male, 16. I always go with the lowest possible age for a first level character because I don't like there to be much room for a backstory for my character. I like to focus on what is happening now and what is going to happen in the future for the character. I think that's far more important than background history, other than the potential skills that they are bringing to the table from their background. And I will talk about that. So In that last video, you watched me roll the using the 4d6, drop the lowest, and I ended up with three 16s and a 12, two 10s, and a 9 or an 11. I'm sorry, an 11, and then a 10. So I placed those, and then I applied the age modifier as a young adult. He gained a +1 to Constitution. That's why that 16 became a 17, and a -1 to Wisdom, which made that 11 come down to a 10. I added my additional languages and so forth, so on and so forth. My AC bonus is a -2, and that's how when you combine up -2, -1, and then an AC of 5, you end up with a 2. I would put into parentheses here a 3 because that would show without the shield. All right. And I have some other role-playing things that I'm going to do with this, because if this character is a seafaring character, he is not on a regular basis going to be wearing chainmail armor. He is most likely going to be wearing nothing. Because it's hard to swim in chainmail. Even though I've seen some people do videos where they can, but swimming in a pond and swimming on the ocean are two different things, especially if you're wearing chainmail that weighs about 35 pounds. So moving on. So as I stated down here in my notes I did shipwriting. Shipwright was his background, his parentage or something was somehow connected to shipwriting. Then he took the 2 secondary skills from the Wilderness Survival Guide and the Dungeoneer Survival Guide of boating and rope use. So once I came up with these things, I started to develop a character concept, right? So I started to say, you know what, my character is going to be someone who is adventuring either on the sea or somewhere, in a harbor town or something. That's going to become a major part of this character. Now, I started looking at, well, what are the weapons that my character would be using? And so I went with the long sword, basically a cutlass, and then a club, specifically a belaying pin. So this is where I'm going to talk about breaking from that min-maxing attitude that comes out of computer gaming. All right. As a fighter, I can choose a specialized weapon, and then I can even double specialize that by using up three slots. So 3 weapon proficiencies. They start off with 4. 3 weapon proficiencies to make a weapon a double specialized weapon. And so I started getting into my role playing, that ROLE playing, rather than ROLL playing, and I decided, which is probably breaking from the extreme norm, to make the belaying pin or the club my double specialized weapon. All right, so this is something that is going to make this fighter a non-cookie cutter fighter. All right, because most people would probably say, hey, you know what? If you're proficient in a longsword, and the longsword is the most common magic weapon in AD&D First Edition. I forget what percentage they are swords, when you're doing the multiple, weapon random roll. But I know that long swords are 60% of all magic swords. And so many people would be like, hey, you should just make the long sword your double specialized weapon. And to me, that's kind of min-maxing. That's kind of cookie cutter. That's the obvious choice that you would do. And I don't want to do the obvious choice. I want to do something that is going to fit the character. So the belaying pin, all right, is a club. that can be thrown, which is really cool too. So it does give him some ranged attack as well. And with this weapon, he is going to be an additional +3 to hit and +3 to damage. So with this weapon overall, he's going to have a +3 to hit with it and a +4 to damage, which really makes it quite effective, right? So now he's going to do, at first level, anywhere from 5 to 11 hit points of damage with a club. All right. Now, again, the belaying pin being more specific, all right, I tied that into, because what do you wrap around the belaying pin? Well, you use that to tie down ropes, and that ties into his rope use as well. So you can see I'm using the character concept to really kind of piece it together as I was going through the creation process and coming up with something that makes a lot of sense. Now, if I am going to be a sailor and that is going to be my background and such, this is what I was trained to do, and I'm a fighter as well, then I went with an alignment of lawful neutral, because you need to have a certain amount of rules and codes and everything on a ship, and neutral because they're not necessarily they're not necessarily good guys or bad guys, or good or evil. He could be a mercenary sailor, or he could be a sailor attached to some kind of a kingdom or whatnot. I haven't picked a deity yet, but I would certainly pick a deity that is a deity of either warfare or the sea, probably leaning towards the sea, and I'll come up with that a little bit later on as well. Other things on this character sheet, because oftentimes AD&D is considered to be too complicated. It's not, and to be honest with you, it's far simpler than fifth edition. Let's be honest here. You do not have multiple layers of action that a character can do. And in my experience of running AD&D First Edition for years, all right, as a dungeon master, it has been very, very rare for me to have a combat last more than 11 or 12 rounds, and that still fits in with up to 8 players. All right, and that still came in under an hour to do, probably pushing around like 40 minutes or so, and that's because the abilities that they have are not multi-layered with secondary or features or secondary skills and second wins and and reactions to certain events and whatnot. All of that stuff is role played. All right, all of that stuff is is beyond what the numbers actually say. And now that I mentioned that, I just remembered, remember this is unscripted, what the numbers say. So your ability scores, I wanted to make this point as well. When I look at these scores, I'm not looking at these scores anymore as numerical. I'm looking at them as a way to describe my character. So my character has a 16 strength, a 16 dexterity, and a 17 constitution. All right, it should be fairly clear from the observer of this character that this character is, this person, I'll say, this person is athletic. All right, very nimble on his feet, very tough, well-built, athletic build, and not quite Conan the Cimmerian, obviously, but certainly a 16-year-old that is very well built and very fit. And so that is going to be something that will make this character kind of stand out in the crowd. Now, I didn't randomly generate his height and weight, but what I did do is I basically said the average human male is going to be 150 pounds, and then I added to that his strength score and his constitution score, and that's where I got the weight of 183 pounds. And I figured if you're 183 pounds and you're fairly this kind of fit and everything, 6 foot is a pretty good is a pretty good height. I didn't want to make him too tall because then he would be super lanky, and I didn't want to make him under 6 foot tall because then, I mean, even though you could be, I know that in my case, I was, I was 5'7" and 188 pounds when I came out of basic and advanced training in the U.S. Army, and I was at the height of my physical ability at that time at age 23. So I know that you could be 5'7" and 188 pounds and be very, very fit, but I still wanted to make it more of a common thing. I did not have a 16 strength, but I was fit. But I wanted something that kind of sort of matched and everything. Maybe I could make his weight a little bit higher for his height. Other things that are on this, and this is another misconception with AD&D, either first or second edition, and that is that the combat matrix is very complicated. Not if you put everything on the, not if you put everything on the character sheet. So here I calculated the character sheet, and you can set this to either using the using either the table or THAC0, and I used the table instead. So I didn't fill in the THAC0 or double check the THAC0. I will see if it's accurate later on, but I'm using to hit table instead, and I input these in. Now, you don't have to input these scores, every time, or even every level. All right, there are level bands, right? So they will have these still, these abilities to hit the various armor classes for quite some time, and so you don't have to worry about changing these constantly. They might not even change once every level. It might be every 2 or 3 levels or so that you will have to change these numbers in here. And these are tied in. If you are using a VTT, this is roll 20. All you have to do is hit the roll, and then you'll see what it is. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to mess with what you're looking at on the screen. So let me go back to here now. So as you can see, the character sheet is something that you will input all of your information on it, but there's only certain portions of it that you actually need to use when you're playing the game. And you might even decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to set my sheet aside. I'm just going to put on a small index card my hit points, my AC, the basic stats for my weapon, and my primary weapon and maybe my secondary weapon, and some other simple modifiers or whatever. And now I can just shift my character sheet to be a record after the adventure where I'm going to input my other things. I'll put down what I've picked up along the way as far as possessions are concerned. I'll adjust my wealth. I will, if I picked up a new weapon, I'm going to put that in there. Maybe that will become my primary weapon, and then I have to change those details on my character sheet, increasing the bonuses or modifiers for that weapon if it is now a magic weapon or whatnot. And this is how I look at taking a character sheet, filling in the information that you need, and then looking to remove your role play as much as possible from the character sheet. Think beyond the numbers. Think beyond what is the minimum maximum that you're doing. And look to create a theme around your character, and then role play that theme out. And the rest of the players sitting at the table, and this is another thing that I would recommend that you do as a dungeon master. I wouldn't let players share their character sheets with each other, but I would recommend that the players oh, excuse me. I would recommend that the players have like a little note card of what they learned about each of the characters in the player party. So of course they're going to pick up right away, the race of the character, the gender of the character, and the other details that are visible details of the character. They might have a sense of what they're wearing and whatnot as well, unless they're obscuring their armor underneath clothing and whatnot. They might make assumptions about the type of clothing that they're wearing, and generally form kind of a perception of that character. As they're adventuring along, they're going to start to learn more and more about the character. I mean, nobody's going to walk up and say, "I'm Helgen, a fighter," a first level. You know what I'm saying? They might use a title for their character class and just say that, and then you might inquire or whatever, or just assume. There is a certain amount of metagaming that you can't remove from it, because players are going to know some general rules about different classes, even if it's a new player coming in. They're going to assume that, hey, somebody is wearing robes and carrying a staff, most likely a wizard or an illusionist. Someone is wearing leather armor, and they're relying on short weapons and daggers and that kind of stuff, and they're kind of stealthy and quiet and observant and whatnot. And all right, that's probably a rogue or a thief or whatever whatever system you're using calls them. And same thing with a fighter. I mean, someone who's wearing plate mail, and carrying a two-handed sword. I know that's a fighter. Possibly it's a cavalier or a paladin or whatnot. But so let them figure it out and let them experience the other players, the other player characters over time, and they'll slowly start to learn these things. They'll slowly start to know, hey, as your family was a family of shipwrights. So what can you tell us about this particular boat that we're looking at? Does it look like it's seaworthy? Does it look like, or they could say, hey, you were a sailor early on in your career. We need to create some kind of a pulley system so that we can move this treasure from this level down to that level without having to just hand pick it and carry it down in 50 different trips. All right, and they'll learn those things about their companions within their adventuring group. That again, it becomes an opportunity for role playing to take place, ROLE playing to take place. And so this is, I think, the importance of using the character sheet more as a record keeper than it is to use it as a template of playing the game. All right, and I think that is the real thing that I'm trying to push here in this video. So, and just remember that, try to condense that down. The character sheet is more so a record keeper than it is a template of how to run your character. you want to go beyond the basic, the ability scores and the numerical information that is on here, and somehow craft an image of your character that reflects that, but it isn't so directly tied to it that someone will say, "Oh, you must have a 16 strength because of this." And I usually try to um, describe things that is going on at my table by removing the numbers from it. And I'm not always successful at doing that. We fall back into old habits and simplicity of just saying, "Oh, you rolled a 16 that missed," or "You rolled a 16 and that hit. You did 3 points of damage." I would rather say, um, you know, you you just barely hit the orc, and you've done a minor injury to it, rather than say 3 points of damage. And the players will get a general sense, and I will up the amount of damage being done descriptively, all right, rather than tying it to numbers. So, and that's something else that you're going to do beyond the character sheet. So it's just taking that beyond point that I'd really like to impress upon you. So, as always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Um, I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen or at a convention sometime soon. Less than 2 weeks away. I believe I am 9 days away from going to the Philadelphia Area Game Expo, Page 2, and really looking forward to going there. It's the first the first convention of the year. Super excited about it, and hopefully I'll meet you there as well. And just keep on enjoying playing whatever edition of Dungeons and Dragons that you enjoy. But I'd certainly like to bring as many new players to AD&D First Edition, as I can, because I think that it really does, at least in my opinion, in my, and admittedly my bias, is that for me, this is probably the best example of advanced Dungeons and Dragons out there, and what I consider to be advanced is anything AD&D and forward. So I'm included in that, second edition, which I have played, a few times, and I've sort of run it. I've run OSR retro clones of it. Third edition 3.5, which I've read but have never played, never run. And fourth edition, same thing. Fifth edition, I have played, I've never run it, but I prefer AD&D First Edition. And I think that the simplicity of it, once you go beyond what the character sheet is saying, the simplicity of it is a selling point for it that I don't think is often mentioned. And that's the whole purpose of this series of videos. So, as always, thanks for joining. Have a great day.